Hello, Facebook, or whoever you are. I'm Tony Dokoupil, and we're in the CBS This Morning Toyota Green Room with the New Yorker's Pulitzer Prize-winning culture critic, Emily Nussbaum. She has a new book out. It's called I'd Like to Watch. Here's a copy right here. It's Arguing My Way Through the TV Revolution. Emily, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
It's a little bit weird to be talking to a TV guy on the internet about television that you wrote about. It's like we're kind of ricocheting off various mediums here. And here we are. What is the argument at the center of the book?
Well, essentially, it's a collection of my writing about television over the last 20 years with a bunch of new stuff. But the argument in it that all the pieces come together to make is about celebrating television as television and detaching it from constant comparisons to books and movies. And it's really a book about expanding the kind of TV that we take seriously and celebrating all of it. And that means soap operas, reality shows, sort of dropping the status anxiety that causes people to call things guilty pleasures.
I'm also against guilty pleasures. I think if it's a pleasure, it's a pleasure. No guilt needed. So do you think if TV was invented before the book and the printing press, we would laud television and deride the book?
Well, I'm trying to walk myself through the situation in which TV was invented before. I mean, after all, novels essentially were. I mean, novels were treated as a kind of television-like derided art form when they first came out, partially because they were episodic. They came out in individual chapters that were published, and once they were combined together into books, they gained more status. But honestly, at the time novels were first invented, they had a lot of the bad reputation TV does now, as something that women read and distracted them from their homes, and that were kind of opiatic and sexual. And
so all new things are derided for a period of time, and then critics like yourself come along and they lift it up.
Well, the main thing about the TV being compared to books and movies is that, books and movies are art forms that people think of as art. And so they have a form of criticism that's directed toward them aesthetically. And so when TV started getting better, one of the things that people would do is they would look at a show like a wonderful show like The Sopranos, and they'd say, this show's great, it's not like TV. Because for decades, people talked about television itself as this terrible, gross, addictive, harmful thing.
It was scooping on our brains. I mean, there was a famous book in the 80s, Amusing Ourselves to Death. It was going to be the ruination of not only of your individual family or your life, but the country.
Yes, definitely. And it certainly wasn't seen as any kind of art form. At best, it was seen as something that could spread good messages, at worst, to destroy your brain. So basically, it was the internet.
Right. Now, everything, you got into this line of work because of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Walk me through that.
Yeah, okay. So I was in graduate school for literature, for Victorian literature. And I was hanging out in the West Village, taking a break from reading 900-page novels. And I had a small TV set. This was in 1997, so it was back in the dark ages. I was watching the TV, and I turned on this show Buffy, which I'd heard some good things about. And honestly, it was this massive, insane conversion experience. I don't feel quite that way anymore, but I fell in love with the show at the time, and I really did become a fan. I'm not saying that I immediately dropped out of graduate school and became a television critic. It took a few more years, but it created a feeling in me of an evangelism feeling of wanting to talk to people about the show. And it was out at the same time as The Sopranos was out, which is another show that I loved very much. But I was very frustrated by the very different critical reactions to the two shows. And in the book, I talk about how this was sort of the base coat on the passionate argument that I kept making for years that basically said there has to be a language to celebrate both of these kinds of shows and the many kinds of shows. Because for a long time, I think to deal with people's shame and anxiety about TV, the only kind of TV that they were capable of praising was TV that they could say was not TV-like. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer, very TV-like.
You don't sound like a TV critic. You sound like a TV cheerleader at the moment.
That is true in the case of this particular show. But I have to say, being a fan of something is different than being a critic, obviously. I think anybody who reads this book will see that I also write critical reviews. But there is a way in which I did start writing about television because I felt like I loved the medium, even if I didn't love individual shows. And honestly, when I was younger, I didn't want to be a critic because I was an artsy hippie and it felt mean to criticize things. And in a lot of ways, I really avoided writing criticism until I found television, where it felt like if I criticized an individual show, it was actually a way of praising television, because it was a way of holding it to high standards and saying it could be great. Because for years, a lot of TV criticism was essentially condescending. You know, if a TV show did anything ambitious, it would sort of get a pat on the head.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's changed, and not just for me. There's a huge range of passionate writing online and off about TV.
So it's a wonderful thing to get paid twice for a single piece of writing. And so some of the pieces in here have already been published. Others have not. How did you select what goes into the book out of the many things you've written over the last decade?
Well, it does have new material in the book as well. But
new material, people, don't worry. If you've been reading The New Yorker, you know, this is not just a collection of...
And there's stuff also from my work at New York Magazine earlier. This isn't a collection of the shows I like the best. It's not a top 10 list. It's a collection of pieces that are designed to make the argument that I'm talking about. The Buffy Sopranos argument, but also the argument about having the language to talk about what TV is, that TV is an episodic art form, a collaborative art form, about TV's relationship with the audience and how that's changed TV. And the pieces that I selected are meant to kind of link together to form that argument. And also, there is a memoir-like quality to criticism. So when I look at the...
Inherently?
I mean, it's my opinion. It's not a mathematical judgment of the shows. And I think there's a personal edge to a lot of criticism. I mean, criticism is a theatrical expression of your voice. And when I look at the pieces, a lot of them show me struggling with certain ideas, pushing up against the limits of my own understanding, changing my mind, and I think that's part of the book as well.
I think it's wonderful that you say that criticism is a theatrical presentation, because what we do out there is sometimes derided as theater, as though people who are writing are not adopting a tone and a point of view and having personality. I mean, tone on the page is no different than a smile into the camera.
I think that's true.
Thank you very much. There is one of the new essays is about the Me2 moment, and you think through many issues, one of which is one that's on the minds of a lot of people, which is, what do I do with something I love where I now know that the creator or the actor is maybe not a great person?
Well, this essay, which is a mixture of a personal essay and a critical analysis, it's a complicated piece. And this piece exists literally because my book leave happened in the fall of 2017. And the Harvey Weinstein piece came down and the Me Too movement began. And I abandoned plans to write several other essays and instead wrote this big essay wrestling with this issue. And as a critic, it's a different thing for me than I think for other people, because the idea of separating the artist from the art when you're just a consumer or a fan is one thing. But part of what I struggle with in that piece is, what's my relationship with these men's work? And, you know, I go back decades thinking about like my early love of Woody Allen, my relationship with artists like Bill Cosby, Roman Polanski, Louis C.K. And the piece is essentially my version of what I think a lot of women and men actually have gone through in the last few years, which is what a friend of mine called the audit, where you sort of look back on your life and you think about, where did my values come from? What are my reactions to these experiences? Yeah. So, but yeah, part of it is about this specific ethical question about, what do I do with this work now? Like, how do I regard it critically? How do I regard it emotionally? And I try to take the different people in different ways. Like, I talk about the Cosby Show and its role on TV.
There is no, it's a very personal decision how one relates to those works. And everybody will come to their own negotiation with themselves and their own conclusion. And I'm sure it's different for different people and different products. But what are the guidelines that you have for yourself?
For myself?
Yeah.
I'm still working that out. I mean, this is the thing, is like you can write an essay and not actually come to clear conclusions, and this is an essay like that.
It's a thinking on the page.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a wrestling act, and it's me struggling with this. I mean, at the end, I do think that by nature, I'm not a cancel delete person. I understand the arguments for essentially erasing somebody's work, but they don't come naturally to me. And as a critic, I feel like it's my obligation to actually wrestle with the work and with the work's relationship to the person's life. And that's what I actually try to do in the essay, is take some of these things that I love, including, you know, masterpieces like Rosemary's Baby, and think about the relationship between that and Polanski. Thinking about the Cosby Show, which was essentially a an incredibly important part of TV that I don't think can be erased or deleted, but that I have to acknowledge its existence was the way Bill Cosby gained access to his victims. So yeah, that's what the piece is about.
I mean, there's a related question which is becoming more relevant as streaming services put older shows online and introduce them to a whole new audience. What do you do with dated references, to dated language, to dated points of view? How do you consume it? How do you explain it to the next generation who may be watching with you?
Well, this comes up all the time. And actually, I love that all this old TV is available. That was never true before. Like, you can't talk about TV without talking about technology. And I always talk about how the ways TV changed can't be distinguished from the development of DVRs and the fact that you could pause or rewind it and discuss it online. And streaming is this whole thing. But the sudden influx of an archive of old TV is fascinating to me, because I used to be constantly hawking people and saying, you have to watch shows from the 70s to understand what sitcoms are. And, I was like this fogey insisting that people educate themselves about TV. But now that's actually possible. At a certain point, like, it's so interesting to me, all of the younger people suddenly started watching Friends and criticizing Friends, and to watch and criticize Friends from the perspective of today is extremely different from watching it when you were the age of the characters and it was on. And I mean, I basically think people do have to take art within the context in which it was made. That's the more fruitful way to talk about it, not to just, it's not my favorite thing when people just publish like a list of things that are problematic about a show. I think there are richer ways to engage with it. But look, I mean, it's true. You look at older art and you sometimes have a shocked reaction to the language they use. But I was fascinated. They just had Norman Lear's one of my favorite
CBS guy.
And
for a long
there was
time.
just that crazy live thing that was done on CBS where
they did it on ABC.
Oh,
really,
an ABC.
But with our guy.
Sorry. But it was so strange. It was like a live presentation of two Norman Lear shows. I think it was a All in the Family episode and Good Times episode, and people watching it were so shocked by just the language of talking about race and identity in the thing, which was native to the 70s, and I loved it. And I was also kind of excited just to see a live TV show. I don't know, it was a weird experiment, but...
We do it live 2 hours every morning right there. Different kind of show. Yeah. But do you have a favorite right now?
Actually, it wasn't, by the way, it wasn't Good Times. It was, I'm sorry, suddenly I'm blank. The Jeffersons. It was the Jeffersons. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite right now on TV? Traditional TV, not streaming.
It's all one big TV thing. Is there?
It's a different.
Do I have a network thing?
Yeah. Do you have a favorite? Well, okay, no, we won't have. I don't want to force you to. I don't want to. There's no good way the conversation can go if I limit you to regular TV.
I'm very interested in network television. I have a lot of nostalgia for a lot of the traditional model of production and things coming out week by week. But it's true, I can't separate in my head. Like, I'll tell you, because I was going to name an HBO show. So.
Well, that's fine. Name an HBO show. Name whatever show you want.
Loza Spookies, Fred Armisen's new show.
Ah, okay.
So good. So funny.
All right.
And weird.
Never heard
really
of it.
Great. It was a great surprise. You're a TV critic, you get a lot of screeners. And then there's this native crankiness to all TV critics right now because there's so much TV. So it's wonderful when you watch something and then you're pleasantly surprised. And this was a great show like that.
So given that you're constantly watching things for work, and I know you're a parent as well, do you have your eighth grader is a son or a daughter?
Son.
You have one son?
Two
kids. Are they like watching TV all the time or streaming all the time, and every time you try to get them off of it, they're like, I learned it from you, Mom. It's like that old drug commercial. Where did you learn to watch 8 hours of TV today? I learned
it from you. This is your brain on TV. I watch some shows with them. I mean, like a lot of kids their age, they're actually more into other kinds of things, and I'm fascinated by the YouTube videos they watch, and just really, like, they'll watch YouTubers that are, like, a guy who reads from funny Reddit threads, which is a really fascinating, strange idea of what you would watch. But I watch their stuff.
That's amazing.
With me, there's a few shows. I mean, we're into comedies, and so we watched The Office, 30 Rock, Parks and Rec, The Good Place. We're watching Kim's Convenience right now, which is this great Canadian show. We watched The Middle. So, and our big show is Jane the Virgin. So we have shows that the boys and I watch together, but that's basically it. I mean, TV's more my thing in my house.
All right.
Okay.
I do take away from that the sitcom is not dead.
No.
Sitcom lives.
Look, what can I say? Comedies on television right now, especially on network, better than dramas.
If you've been watching too much TV and you want something to read, Emily Nussbaum's I Like to Watch is very good. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Bye,
for having me.
Facebook.
Bye,
Get out
Facebook.
there, whoever you are.